My father called at 7:14 a.m. on a Thursday, 3 days before my wedding, and the first thing I noticed was that his voice carried no weight at all. The same tone he used when he called to say dinner plans had changed, or that he'd be late picking someone up from somewhere. Calm. Practical. Like what he was about to say was a small administrative matter that simply needed relaying. "Nora," he said, "I won't be walking you down the aisle on Saturday." I was standing in my kitchen in Harlan, Ohio, still in yesterday's socks, holding a mug that had gone cold. I didn't say anything. I let the sentence exist for a moment before I tried to understand it. "Your sister called me last night," he said. "She's been struggling. You know how Brianna gets. She thinks it would be hard for her, watching that moment, given everything she's been going through." I asked what everything meant. He said he didn't want to get into it. He said Brianna needed the family around her right now. He said he thought I could just walk alone, that lots of brides did it, that it was actually quite meaningful, walking yourself. My mother was on the line too, I realized. She'd been quiet until then. "It's not a big deal, Nora," she said. "You've never needed anyone to hold your hand." Something went solid behind my sternum. Not grief, not fury, something closer to a door closing on a room I'd been standing in for years without noticing the walls. I said I understood. I ended the call. I set the mug down on the counter, and I stood there looking at it until the refrigerator cycled on. The kitchen was bright with the kind of flat Thursday morning light that has no warmth in it. I stayed there for a while. There was nothing pressing. There was just the counter and the mug and the fact of what had just been said to me. Then I washed the mug out because that was the kind of person I was, and I set it on the drying rack, and I went to the window and looked at the yard. My name is Nora Calloway. I was 29 years old that Thursday morning. I worked in records administration at the Morrow County Courthouse. Filing, indexing, the kind of work that makes other people's histories legible and permanent. I was good at it. I had been doing it for 6 years, and I understood, in a way most people don't, that what gets recorded and what gets remembered are two different things. I grew up in Harlan, Ohio, in a beige 2-story house on Kellerman Road with my parents Gerald and Diane and my younger sister Brianna. Gerald sold insurance. Diane ran a bookkeeping operation out of the house for local contractors. Brianna was 5 years younger than me, and she had always been, in our family's shared vocabulary, the one who felt things more deeply. That was the phrase they used. Not that she was difficult. Not that she required management. Just that she felt things more deeply, which meant that when Brianna was in distress, the household organized itself around her distress, and when she was not, we returned to normal, and the reorganization was never discussed. I had been the other kind. The kind you didn't reorganize around. The kind you counted on to manage and to not say anything about it. I had filled that role for so long that it had stopped feeling like a role and started feeling like a fact about me, the way left-handedness is a fact or the ability to parallel park. Gerald was not a cruel man. That's important to say. He was a conflict avoidance man, someone who had learned early that the fastest way to restore quiet was to give Brianna what she needed and then explain to me, with great reasonableness, why that had been the right call. He always had a reason. The reasons were always logical. They just always arrived at the same destination. My grandfather Walt had been different. Walt Calloway had built a small property business in Morrow County over 40 years. Not large, not glamorous, mostly land parcels and a few rental houses on the east side of Harlan. He died 26 months before my wedding, and he left me, specifically, the survey map of the original parcel, a water-stained document creased into quarters, edges soft from handling, stored in the back of his metal filing cabinet in the workshop behind his house. He'd cleared that land himself in 1971. He'd registered it himself. He'd driven to the county seat and stood at a counter a lot like the one I stood at now, and he'd made it official. He came to every school event I ever had. He was the one who taught me to drive. When I graduated, he brought flowers and stood in the parking lot afterward with the same expression he wore when something mattered to him. Not a smile exactly, just steadiness, like he was making sure the moment got witnessed. When I got the courthouse job, he called and said, "That's the real work, Nora. The work that lasts." I had carried that map with me since the day we cleaned out his workshop. Marcus, my fiancé, Marcus Webb, found me still standing at the counter when he came in from his morning run. He read my face before I said anything. "What happened?" he said. It wasn't a question. I told him. He stood very still. Then he asked, "Do you want me to call Ray?" Ray was his uncle. Marcus's mother's brother. 63 years old, retired from 30 years with the county water department, the kind of man who showed up to things on time and asked what needed carrying. I said not yet. But I thought about it. The wedding had been organized the same way. I had put $6,340 into it from my own savings. The florist deposit, the second payment to the caterer, the cost of the bridesmaid alterations when the shop underquoted. Diane had handled the invitations and the venue booking at Delwood Community Center and done it well, and I gave her credit for that. But the vendor calls, the seating chart, the follow-up with St. Bridget's Lutheran about the ceremony order, those had come to me one by one because I was the one who returned calls promptly and kept the spreadsheet current. Brianna had been the flower girl at her college roommate's wedding the previous spring and had come home describing every detail with the particular enthusiasm of someone who has recently decided they have opinions about events. She had opinions about my centerpieces. She expressed them at dinner, and Diane said they were very good points, and Gerald agreed it was worth considering, and I said I would think about it. I did not change the centerpieces. That had been in April. By July, Brianna's enthusiasm had shifted to something else, a work situation. She described in broad strokes a friend group that was realigning, a general sense that things were not going her way. I recognized the cycle. I had watched it come around many times. The family would contract around her for a season, and then it would expand again, and I would return to approximately the same position I'd held before. What I had not accounted for was that the contraction would land on a Saturday in September. I had been contributing to the Kellerman Roadhouse since I was 22. Not in a formal arrangement, there were no contracts, no ledgers. It was the kind of contribution that accumulates without announcement. The utility bill one month when Gerald's commission check came in short, the furnace repair the following winter, the groceries during the stretch when Diane's bookkeeping clients were slow to pay. I drove Brianna to her appointments when her license was suspended for 8 months. I painted the back bedroom. I fixed the gutter section that pulled away from the soffit after an ice storm, standing on a ladder in March with my hands going numb. There were other things too, smaller things I'd stopped cataloging because the list had grown past the point where keeping it felt useful. That's the kind of contribution that doesn't make a scene. It also doesn't make a record. None of this was unusual. It was just what you did. That's what I told myself, and I believed it because in our family, the effort that didn't make a scene was also the effort that didn't get named. I called Gerald back that evening. Marcus sat at the kitchen table and said nothing, which was the right thing to do. Gerald answered on the second ring. "I just want to understand it," I said. "Walk me through it." "I explained it this morning, Nora," he said. "You told me Brianna would find it hard. I'm asking what that means for Saturday specifically." "She needs to feel like the family is unified," he said. "Walking you down the aisle is a spotlight moment. You know how she gets when there's a spotlight she's not part of." "She was invited to be a bridesmaid," I said. "She declined. She was going through something then, too." "Gerald," I said. "I planned this wedding for 14 months. I contributed to this wedding financially. I am the person getting married." There was a pause. Then Diane's voice came through. She'd been listening, or she'd just picked up the extension. "Nora, you're making this bigger than it needs to be," she said. "I'm asking a direct question about my own wedding." "And Gerald gave you an answer." "We're trying to keep the peace." "With whom?" I asked. "With your sister," Diane said. "Who is family? Who is hurting?" "I'm also family," I said. "Of course you are. But you've always been the strong one, Nora. You don't need the same things Brianna needs. You never have." Something tightened across my shoulders. Not resentment, not surprise, something more like recognition, the sensation of finally reading the label on a jar you've been reaching into for years. "So because I manage," I said, "I get managed out." "That's not what I said." "It's what you meant." Gerald came back. His voice had gone from practical to tired. Nora, we raised you not to be selfish. We raised you to think of the whole family. I've thought of this family my entire life, I said. And we appreciate that, Diane said. But Brianna is ungrateful? I said. A pause. What? Diane said. You were going to say I was ungrateful for not accepting this gracefully, I said. I've heard it before. I'm finishing the sentence. I was not going to say that, Diane said, and her voice had gone to a place I recognized, the particular register of someone who is about to say something they will describe later as having been said calmly and reasonably. I was going to say that Brianna is going through something real, and your father and I need you to be an adult about this. I am being an adult, I said. That's why I called back. Gerald said, Nora. I'll see you Saturday, I said. I ended the call. I stood in the kitchen for a moment. Marcus was still at the table. He didn't ask how it had gone. He said, Do you want tea or do you want to just sit? I said I'd sit. We sat. Brianna texted at 9:47 p.m. It was a long message. The gist of it was that she hadn't meant for this to turn into a whole thing, that she hoped I understood, that she really did love me, that she just didn't think she could sit there and watch Dad walk me down the aisle without it breaking something in her given where she was right now, and that she hoped my day would be beautiful. I read it twice. I set my phone face down on the table. The kitchen was quiet. Outside, someone 2 streets over was running a leaf blower in the dark, which made no sense at that hour, but there it was. Marcus reached across and put his hand on the table next to mine, not on top of mine, just near it. I looked at the ceiling for a while. Then I picked up my phone and called Ray. Wedding morning. I woke at 5:50 a.m. I made coffee. I laid my dress out on the bed in the spare room. I opened the metal box on my closet shelf and took out the water-stained survey map, still in its 4 creased quarters, and I set it on the dresser. I showered. I dried my hair. Marcus left for Ray's house at 7:30 to get ready there. My 2 friends from work arrived at 8:15, and we set up the makeup on the kitchen table and we talked about small things. Ray arrived at 10 a.m. He was wearing a dark suit and a tie that Marcus had picked out. He carried a paper bag with coffee and 2 kolaches from the Czech place on Route 19 because he had asked what I liked and Marcus had told him. He set the bag on the counter. He said, You ready? I said I was. We drove to St. Bridget's. I went into the side room. I waited. The music changed. The doors opened. I had not announced what was going to happen. I had not told Diane. I had not told Gerald. I had told Marcus, and Marcus had told Ray, and Ray had said, I'll be there at 10, and that was the entirety of the plan. When the doors of St. Bridget's Lutheran opened and the guests turned, they saw me standing at the back of the aisle in my dress, and beside me, holding my arm with his hand over mine, was Ray Webb, 63 years old, steady-eyed, in his dark suit and Marcus's chosen tie. I heard the sound the room made. It was not a gasp exactly, more like the specific silence that happens when something unexpected resolves into something right, and then the sound that follows it, which was closer to a murmur. Then warmth, then someone near the front beginning to clap, and then the room followed. I looked straight ahead. Marcus was standing at the altar, and when he saw us, when he saw Ray's hand over mine and my face, he put his hand over his mouth for a moment, and then he lowered it, and he was smiling. I walked the whole length of that aisle. At the back, in the last row on the left, Gerald sat very still. I did not look at him directly. I was aware of his location the way you are aware of a cold spot in a room, peripheral, specific, not something you lean into. Diane was beside him. Neither of them moved. I reached the altar. Ray placed my hand in Marcus's hand and he stepped back and the ceremony began. The reception at Delwood Community Center was loud and good. The food was what I had ordered and the flowers were what I had chosen, and the centerpieces were the ones I had not changed. I danced with Marcus's aunt first and then with 2 of my courthouse colleagues, and by the time the second hour began the room had the warm, disorganized quality of a good event that has stopped trying to be formal. Gerald found me near the end of the second hour. I was standing beside the gift table and he came from my left, and I turned when I heard my name. He looked tired. "That was a choice," he said. "It was," I said. "You could have warned us." "You made your decision 3 days before my wedding," I said. "I made mine. Ray Webb is practically a stranger to this family." "He showed up," I said. Gerald's jaw tightened. "You wanted to humiliate us." "No," I said. "I wanted someone to walk with me." "You declined." "I found someone who didn't. In front of everyone." "Gerald," I said. "I want to show you something." I reached into the inside pocket of my bridal clutch, the small one I'd transferred a few items into for the reception. I took out my phone. I opened the County Property Records app, the same system I worked in at the courthouse, and I navigated to the Morrow County parcel search, and I found the entry for the Kellerman Road property, and I brought up the attached document scans. I turned the screen toward him and laid it flat on the table between us. "That's Grandpa Walt's original survey," I said. "Filed 1971. And that's the transfer of record from his estate. That property was assessed at $287,500 last cycle." Gerald looked at the screen. He looked at me. "What is this?" he said. "This is what Walt left on record," I said. "He told me once that the work that lasts is the work that gets written down. I've been thinking about that." "What are you saying?" "I'm saying that I've been part of this family in ways that didn't get written down," I said. "And that's fine. But I want you to understand that I've been keeping my own record. In my head. And today was on that record." "You're saying we failed you," he said. "I'm saying you made a choice about whose feelings to protect, and it wasn't mine, and you've done that more than once. I've accepted it. What I won't accept is being told to accept it with a smile while I also write the check and make the seating chart. That's not. You raised me not to be selfish," I said. "I know. I've heard it. But there's a version of that lesson that just means, be quiet and give us what we need and don't ask for anything back." I took the phone off the table. I put it back in my clutch. "I love you, Gerald. I hope you enjoy the rest of the reception." I walked back to the head table. Marcus found my hand under the tablecloth and held it. I ate my dinner. I watched Ray talk to Marcus's cousins across the room. He had a way of sitting at a table like the table was exactly where he meant to be. He would come for dinner most Sundays after that, and I would think, more than once, about how little it takes to show up consistently, how rare it is, and how much weight it holds, and how you don't always know until much later which people in your life were doing it quietly the whole time. 14 months later, I was sitting in the workshop behind Walt's house, which Marcus and I had been paying to maintain, with eventual plans to convert, and I was going through the metal filing cabinet in the corner. The survey map was still in its folder, where I had returned it after the courthouse query. I took it out, unfolded it on the workbench, and smoothed the creases with my palm the way I had seen Walt do 100 times. The paper was heavier than you'd expect. The county surveyor's stamp in the lower right corner had faded to a dark gray, but it was still legible. Walt's signature was on the back, in the handwriting of a man who had learned penmanship when penmanship was still taught. I stayed there for a while, just looking at it. The workshop smelled like sawdust and the oil sealer I'd been using on the shelves, and the light came in sideways through the single window on the west wall, and it was very quiet. Gerald had sent a card in the spring. It was brief. It said he hoped Marcus and I were well, and that he thought about the wedding sometimes, and that he supposed he could have handled things differently. He did not say how. He did not ask to talk. I read it twice. I set it on the kitchen counter. I did not reply. Diane had called once in the winter. I let it go to voicemail. The message was 12 minutes long and covered a great deal of ground. I listened to the first 4 minutes and then I stopped. I have not deleted it. I have also not returned it. Brianna and I had not spoken. Marcus and I were good. We were more than good. We had settled into a life that was quieter and more deliberate than anything I'd had before, in a house 3 streets from the workshop, with a garden Marcus was learning in sections, starting with tomatoes because he said they told you immediately if you were doing it wrong. He had lost his first planting to a late frost and started again in June without complaining about it, and I thought that was something worth knowing about a person. I refold the survey map. I put it back in its folder. I put the folder in the cabinet in the slot Walt had labeled in his handwriting, which said simply, Land, Original. Some things get written down, and some things get witnessed, and some things you just carry, and you learn, eventually, the difference between what you carry for yourself and what you carry for other people. That day at St. Bridget's, I finally stopped carrying something that had never been mine to begin with. If this story found something true in it, pass it to someone who might need it. You never know who's holding something they don't have words for yet.